Patrick Mitchell, thank you for having this conversation with us and enlightening all the students that are new to Texas ProStart Invitational regarding any judging processes that you might think are helpful for any teams. So before I begin, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and who you work for and what you've done in your career?
Well, my name is Patrick Mitchell. I work for Benny Keith Foods. I'm a corporate chef for them, kind of a culinary advisor, liaison, resource for our customers. And I've been in the industry for over 40 years now. I went to the Culinary Institute of America. I graduated in 1981. I had been in the industry prior to that, worked in New Orleans for 4 years, and then have been in Texas ever since then. I got here in 1984. And I'm an ACF judge, and I've competed all over the world in my career. My last competition was 2018, where I competed in the Global Chef's Challenge representing the USA, came in 8th overall in the world, and I had won 2016 USA Chef of the Year, which qualified me.
That's great.
And I've been involved with ProStart for probably, 7 or 8 years, something like that.
Okay, so why don't we start with product check-in, and you can tell us a little bit about that. Give us an overview of how that works, and then we'll go into a few tips for the teams.
Okay, first of all, at product check-in, it's important for the competitors to understand that the competition has now actually started. So they're being scored, they're being judged. So everything that they do from this point forward is being judged. So proper uniform, and I know they won't have the uniform that they'll compete in, but they'll have their school uniform or whatever uniform that they have, but make sure that everybody's in the same uniform, the same style shoes, the same, I understand there'll be a different shoe between a man and a woman shoe, but it should be the same style. If they have a baseball hat on, they should all have a baseball hat on. If they have a chef hat on, they should all have a chef hat on, that kind of thing. So make sure that their uniform is consistent. And
sometimes even down to the socks, right? If one has red socks, they should all have red socks.
Right. Yeah. Or black socks and one person white socks, that kind of stands out. Okay. So, and then when you get to the station there for check-in, the judges are going to ask you to put produce on one station, dairy on another station, and then their proteins on a third station. Listen to those instructions and follow those instructions and pay attention and put the products in the proper places. It's not the end of the world if you didn't hear it or things like that, but it's really important to kind of stress this notion to pay attention to the rules and listen to what's being told, because that's all part of following instruction and all that stuff. So put that product on the table, and only the product on the table, not the coolers, not the containers that they're carried in, just the product, so we can inspect that and maintain proper temperature and sanitation with those products. What we're looking for in that is we're looking for what your intent is. So, we can only kind of look at a couple of things, and we don't know what your mindset is, but if you have a person comes in and has those little baggies that you buy one bell pepper at the store and you put it in that little baggie, and then you buy 2 limes and you put them in the baggie. If they come in with a bunch of baggies and they're throwing all those baggies up on the thing, that tells the judges that they just went to the store and bought the product and threw it in a cooler, and they're just not really focused on proper storage of the product. If you buy a bell pepper and you have it in a container with a lid on it in the cooler, limes over here, maybe limes and lemons and oranges are in one container because they're all citrus fruit. Mm-hmm. But it shows us that you're thinking about storage. You're thinking about how it will be stored in the walk-in. Things are labeled. Obviously, we know what a bell pepper is. But if you've got a label and a date on it, it shows us that your thought process is labeling and dating. So that's going to carry through for everything else. So the difference between sugar and salt may be obvious to you when you put it in the container, but when you go to use it, you don't really know which one is which without having to taste it. So labeling is all important. So in the product check-in, we're looking kind of for that uniformity and consistency, and we're looking for proper handling, temperature of product. Remember, it's critical the product is at the right temperature. So if you're going to load your cooler the night before you leave that cover open in the refrigerator so that the ambient air temperature can get into that cooler. If you load it outside, it's in the kitchen area, and then close the lid and put it in the refrigerator, that cooler is very well insulated, so that cold air in the refrigerator can't get into the food in there. So it might not be at the right temperature. So little things like that. If you're going to buy something on the way to the competition, one of the things that we see sometimes is somebody has dairy that's out of temperature. So then they run to the store and they go to the reach in and they open the thing and they grab one of the dairies right out of the refrigerator and they put it in a cooler and they zoom it right back to the competition. We test it again and it's still not in the right temperature. And the reason is that cream may have gotten, it's still a good temperature, but it's out of the temperature zone that we're looking for because it's right there. People at that store are opening the doors and
Right.
in and out. So, you want that stuff maybe submerged in ice, give it a little bit of time there so it can really get up to temperature and you don't have any problems that way.
Okay, so what you're looking for in product check-in overall is they're very organized, things to be labeled and stored properly, nothing out of temperature. And so they're literally going to go through everything they're using for competition and put it on a table, and then you're going to temp it and check it out.
Sure.
And so is it safe to say that if you have a list that's, the National provided a template this year for product check-in. And so if you have everything on that list and maybe you leave one thing out, but it's in the cooler, what happens then?
Well, I think according to the rules, you're not allowed to use it. I think you have to have everything listed. So, your cooler should have a list for what's in each cooler and double check it. It's what do they say? Measure twice and cut once. So make sure that you go through and double check all of your lists and triple check and all that kind of stuff, because you don't want to take a chance. If there's something that you forgot and you can't get it, or you don't realize it until the time of competition, you can't use it, you can't bring it back. So it's important to make sure that you have all the right product at check-in.
Okay. So you can only replace items if they're out of temp or bad, and then you all throw them out and they come back the next day or that same day and bring it back to you.
Correct. They can come back either that same day or anytime up until they go on to the floor to compete.
Okay. So what is your best advice from a judging standpoint on product check-in?
Just, really watch temperature. That's the biggest thing. Some of the problem spots that we have are eggs. Eggs, a lot of times people want to wrap them in paper towels and put them into a container and really protect them from bouncing around and getting broken and things like that, which is great. But the problem with that is that also insulates them and it doesn't allow the cold to get in through all that paper towel, and they end up, out of temperature and not at a good temperature. So there are some, I think they're camping containers. They're little 6-slot things that open up, and you put a little one egg in each slot, and then you close. It's a little plastic thing. Something like that would be good. And then have it kind of buried in the ice. So it the less amount of air around that egg, that air acts as a buffer, protecting it from the cold temperature. So the less amount of air around that egg, the better off it is, and it'll stay. Some people put a lot of ice and they bury everything in ice. That can be bad too, because it has a tendency to freeze the items. So, there's a fine line there. So just check your temperatures in the storage, and also make sure you don't have any open containers. Anything that you're going to bring in has to be in the original unopened container. Okay. We see a lot of problems with that.
So what about protein? If they get, like, let's just say a big slab of something donated, how does that work?
Well, that's a tough thing. They can't. I think it has to be purchased in the original container, as I recall. If you get something donated and somebody wants to, give you a bunch of shrimp and they're already butterflied and they're already, you can't use that in the competition. You have to do that work in the competition, that fabrication. If you want to go to the store and buy pre-cut steaks, you can do that because they're readily available out there, and people can do that. I would recommend, if you're going to do tenderloin and you're going to do tenderloin filet mignon steaks out of the tenderloin, buy a piece of tenderloin, bring it in, and cut your steaks during the competition, because now you're showing some craft skill there, as opposed to somebody that just brought in, two fillets and grilled them.
Okay. So, and also, like, what if they got protein donated from like a broadliner, and they had like maybe a statement or an invoice that went with that, or something that showed they got it?
Oh,
is that?
Sure. Yeah. So there might be an example where, even whether it's donated or even if it's purchased, you might purchase a case of a protein, a pork loin or something like that. And you're not going to bring the entire pork loin in, because you're only going to use enough for 2 portions, and the pork loin is going to be huge, So you can bring in an invoice and show that that's what you had. You brought in a piece of that pork loin or something like that. If not, an invoice, if it's donated, yeah, you need to kind of get some sort of a statement.
Okay. So one last thing, I guess, how would you treat like cilantro, like herbs and stuff like that? What's a good advice for that?
As far as packing and transport? Herbs, there's 2 different types of plastic bags, and I learned this not long ago. A high density plastic bag, and ask your supplier for a high density plastic bag, and you can put those herbs right into that plastic bag and Ziploc it, and it'll hold them very well. Sometimes people wrap them in a little bit of paper towel, just to kind of absorb any excess moisture. It's not a good idea on some herbs to wrap them in wet paper towel, because sometimes that added moisture has a problem. But I found that these high density Ziploc bags really help. I found it by accident, and then I was talking to the supplier, and he said, yeah, they really work great for holding herbs. I would put them in my refrigerator and that, and I noticed when I got that type of bag, a different bag, that it really worked well.
And who's the supplier, just in case we get questions about
that? Well, that was the manufacturer that I was.
Oh, okay.
Beneke supplies them, and I was talking to the manufacturer. I think Pactiv was the brand that made them.
Okay. So last question, what are the craziest things that you've seen in product check-in?
Oh, I've seen some crazy things. I don't know. That's hard to say.
What about the best things you've seen in product check-in?
Just really good organization. People that have things separated out, so you don't have cross-contamination. Let's say you have in your protein cooler, you may have some chicken in there, and you may have a live lobster, and you may have a piece of filet or a piece of beef in there, because you're going to do three different proteins on your plate. Keep those separated. Keep them in separate containers so that they're not getting cross-contaminated and protected that way. Good organization, a good list of all the ingredients, and come in with clean hands and gloves if you need to use gloves and things like that. If you want to use sanitizer, if you want to go over and wash your hands, excuse yourself for just a minute. We'll be right back. We're going to go wash our hands. That's fine. But that kind of stuff. But our assumption is that you are handling this food already when you get to us. Clean environment. Okay,
that's great. Okay, so now we'll move on to knife skills, which is also part of teamwork. It's team presentation, work skills, and organization. Sorry.
Okay.
So knife skills is incorporated into that. Tell us a little bit about knife skills and what you've seen there, and an overview of that.
Sure. So in past years they had specific cuts. Each team member had to do a specific cut, and there was a list of, eight different cuts, and you had to pick 4 different cuts, and each team member had to do one of them. Over time, they kind of eliminated that. I would prefer to still see that in there, because I think that's important. I think anytime you're in a competition like this, you want to be able to show your skills, and you want to be able to show that you have different techniques and different abilities. So what I would recommend to any team that's doing this, have each team member do something. It may not be a specific tournée or a specific Brunoise cut or something like that, but something. And just remember that, we're having to judge knife skills in this competition. So every time you pick up a knife, we're looking at how you're handling that knife, how you're holding that knife, how you're using that knife. Are you using the right knife for the right job? Are you trying to peel a carrot with a French knife? Something that you should maybe use a paring knife for instead. But we're kind of looking at all of those things, and every time you use that knife, just as precise as you possibly can. And it goes all the way to the end of the competition. You're maybe now done, and you've got a piece of protein that you've cooked off, and now you're slicing that to put it on the plate. Again, that's knife skills. It's not just a knife cut of a vegetable or a potato like that. It's all of those knife skills. So kind of bear that in mind every time that you're picking up the knife, that you want to be as precise as possible.
Okay. What are some very impressive things you've seen on the floor with regard to knife skills?
First of all, I'm impressed by the quality that these students are doing with 2 butane burners and no electricity in 1 hour. That amazes me, first of all. But the thing that amazes me more than anything, I think, is that when adversity hits, how these students react to that, because that's a part of everyday life in a kitchen. Something is going to happen that you don't expect. Something is going to change. An oven's going to go out. A refrigerator is going to go down. Or something is going to happen. How do you handle that? Because you're going to have to still get through it. The customer sitting in the dining room doesn't really care that something happened there. So it's how do you work through that adversity when it hits? And what that shows me is a team that has practiced and is able to overcome the unexpected in the competition, because they know all of the other things so well that they can problem solve as they go. The team that hasn't practiced an awful lot, when adversity hits, they're kind of thrown for a loop and they don't know what to do. And these teams that have practiced, a lot of times maybe some of that adversity has already hit in practice sessions. So,
Okay. All right. Well, in summary, outside of all of the judging components you've done, you're on the floor. How do you know if a team is pretty good and their chances are high of making it to state or even nationals?
Team that's organized, a team that works clean, a team that communicates, and when they communicate amongst themselves. So, sometimes we get these teams that want to get really loud and show the judges that we are communicating and everybody's going to hear what we're. That's not real life. In a kitchen, you wouldn't be allowed to talk like that. It would be too loud. It would be distracting to other parts of the kitchen. So communicate within your team, and also the other thing I'd like to say is that teams that focus on their job, they focus on the program that they've practiced, and the judges in their mind aren't even there. They're walking around and taking a look and doing this and doing that, but the team is so focused on themselves, helping each other, supporting themselves, getting their job done, that they don't even realize that the judges are around, and that's the way it should be. Instead of trying to impress judges, instead of trying to play to the judges, instead of trying to, manipulate this rule. I hate to say manipulate, but I mean, just play to this rule or kind of showcase that rule type of a thing. Those teams are usually pretty successful.
Okay. And then as far as, teamwork and all that, as long as they're having fun and, in a relaxed stance and everything's good within their 10 by 10 space, that's also a good thing to see, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, the thing that I like to tell the competitors is to relax and enjoy the day and have fun. And it's easy for me to say that on the outside of that 10 by 10. But the reality is that everybody's going to be nervous, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely normal. And if anybody says that they're not nervous, they're probably not being 100% truthful with you, because everybody at some point is going to be nervous. It's all about managing those nerves. And I found when I was competing that when I would get nervous, I would then start focusing on my tasks at hand. what's the first thing I need to do? And then the second thing I need to do, and then bone out the pheasant, and then braise the legs, and then get that going. And when you start going through step by step by step, your mind comes off being nervous, and it goes on to what those processes are. And then you're into that, and the nerves kind of go away. If you don't get out of that nervousness and you continue to keep thinking about that, the more you think about it, the more nervous you're going to get. And I've seen people just melt down. So change your mindset, start thinking about something else, talking to somebody about your teammates about something, and just kind of find a way to work through it. But yeah, teams that have fun, that enjoy it, that again, and it comes from practice. That's really the big thing, practice. And those teams that practice an awful lot are the teams that are successful because they're ready for anything.
Right.
Seen a lot of that in their practice sessions.
Okay, awesome. Well, are there any last minute things or advice that you want to offer up before we go?
Just highlight your skills, showcase as much as you can, and show us what you've been working on, and show us what you're preparing for, and that you're happy to be there.
Right.
You're there because you want to be there, and not being held captive, I guess.
Right.
Have fun with it.
And just so everyone knows, you're a real person. You're a human being.
Oh yeah.
You've made a lot of mistakes. I've seen them firsthand.
Okay, we don't need to get into all that. But that's a great point though, Yvonne. I'd like to mention is that don't let the judges get into your head. So if you're working and you see a judge come walking up and standing there and he's looking, and then all of a sudden they grab their pencil and they start writing something down, don't second guess what you're doing. Have confidence in what you're doing and keep doing the work that you're supposed to do, as long as you know you're doing the right thing. Because this judge might be writing down something good that they just observed you do. They might be writing down something that they saw could use some improvement, or they might be writing down something that they saw another team do that they forgot to write down. And when they saw you doing it right, they said, oh, that's right, and flipped a page to another team, and they're making a note on another team. So any number of things can be happening. So don't let that throw you when you see a judge making a note or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
That's a great point. All righty, friend. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the Zoom meeting, your first Zoom meeting, my third Zoom meeting, and sharing all of your insights.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to seeing you in Frisco.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And good luck to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.